really irks my nerves, what really grinds my gears, is them folks to be like, girl, you need to buy this fragrance. I know you ain't never smelled it before, but honey, this cologne, this perfume, it smells good. And then you end up going online to buy the fragrance, and you and your house end up stinking. Don't do that no more. Because you can just switch to Scentbird, the fragrance subscription service that has over 900 fragrances, where you can choose a different one of those 900 fragrances to be shipped out to you every 30 days. Let me tell you about the fragrances I got last month. I got me some Sexual Noir by Jerldean. And this is a fragrance with a mixture of strawberries, warm vanilla. It even has a hint of innocent pink orchid in it. Next, I got me some Victoria's Secret's Bear. And this one has one of my favorite scents to it, honey. It's sandalwood. And that Egyptian violet is what brings it on home. And all of these fragrances are something to write home about. But this doggone Get a Room by Confessions of a Rebel, it is one of the sexiest fragrances. And do you know how much it would cost me to try to buy all of these wonderful fragrances in a bottle? Ain't nobody got time for that. And why would I anyway, when I still have fragrance left over after the 30 days? Scentbird usually is $16.95 a month, and that is already a cheap price. I'm gonna give you your first fragrance for only $8. All you have to do is click the link below or scan the QR code and use my special coupon code that's displayed on the screen. All right, since that is out of the way, this is Ashley with Ashley Says So, and I am back with another old Hollywood scandal video. And everybody likes to talk about Robert Johnson. You know, they talk about the legends of him, the mystery of him. Oh, he sold his soul to the devil. He died at the age of 27. He's in the 27 Club. He's the basis for the movie Sinners. But nobody really likes to talk about Robert Johnson, the man, and the life that he led, and the sins that he committed. And so, you know, we finna get into that old down-home country scandal on this one, honey, right after this disclaimer. All of my videos are for entertainment purposes. Everything in them is rumor, gossip, and scandal that I get from books, word of mouth, on TV. Let's get to it. Robert Leroy Johnson was born on May 8, 1911 in Hazelhurst, Mississippi. His mother's name was Julia Dodd, and his father's name was Noah Johnson, and Robert was born into a right messy situation. You see, Julia was married to a very well-to-do man by the name of Charles Dodd, and she actually had 10 kids with Charles Dodd. But Charles ended up getting in trouble with some of the local white men in Hazelhurst, Mississippi, and so he jumped on a train headed to Memphis, Tennessee. He told Julia that as soon as he found a place to stay, and as soon as he found a way to continue making good money, he would send for her and the children. The folks say that Julia said okay, and immediately started seeing a man by the name of Noah Johnson. She ended up having not only Robert by Noah Johnson, she had a second outside child by this man as well. Then she was sitting up there with her hair blew back when her husband Charles ended up reaching out and telling her, okay, I'm ready for you and the kids to come and join me over in Memphis. Julia knew that there was no way she could lie herself out of this situation, so she ended up telling her husband Charles the truth. You know, I've messed around on you. I have 2 children by this Noah Johnson, and surprisingly, Charles took it very well. He told Julia, you know, just come on up, bring our 10 children and bring your 2 outside kids. Just come on, live with me. I'll take care of them. Well, Julia gets there and finds out that she wasn't the only one that had been acting up. Charles had an outside child as well. And baby, the folks say Julia caused a ruckus, honey. She couldn't deal with the disrespect. Ain't no way she could sit up here and look at this child. And it was even worse because sometimes the child's mama would come by the house. She just wasn't gonna deal with it. And so in feeling this way, Julia packed her bags and she ended up leaving Charles and their 10 kids that they had together. And she also left her 2 outside children, Robert and his sibling. And Charles Dodd could have sent Robert and that other baby on back to Hazelhurst, but instead he decided to raise these 2 outside children as his own. And this was great for Robert at the time. You know, he had a very happy childhood. Folks around town said that they used to see him playing his diddle bow and his harmonica. But then sometime around the age of 10 or 12, his happy days came to an end. And this is because he and his older sister Carrie were walking through town when Carrie shouted out, "Look, Robert, there go Mama. That's our Mama." And it was Julia. So Carrie takes Robert's hand because she wants Robert to see his mother, to really meet his mother. Because you got to remember, he was like a young child, maybe around 2 years old, when Julia abandoned them. And so Carrie wanted him to meet their mother. Well, when they ran up to Julia, I'm not sure if she became shamed due to the fact that she had left them behind, or if she was sincere. But gossip claims she started doing all of this hollering and yelling about, "Oh, my babies, I missed y'all so much. Y'all coming to live with me. Y'all got to come home with me." This is how Robert ended up moving to Arkansas and staying with a man who hated him named Dusty Willis. And Dusty Willis was Julia's husband and Robert's new stepdaddy. And he just did not take to Robert Johnson at all. Right off the bat, he started calling Robert a lazy, shifty-eyed Negro. And he felt this way because he wanted Robert to work the fields with him, and instead Robert would focus on his instruments. And so it became a vicious cycle of Dusty berating him and beating Robert, trying to force him to get out into the field. Actually, the only time that Robert Johnson could find any joy during his teen years is when he could sneak out in the middle of the night and go to the juke joint. So by the time Robert Johnson was 17 or 18 years old, he was tired of living this hellish life and he ended up running away. He met a pretty young girl by the name of Virginia Travis, and he was ready to make a life of his own. So he and Virginia got married immediately, and soon after that, she became pregnant. And they were said to be a very happy young couple, but Robert was also very focused on his music. And even more than that, he was focused on his new instrument, the guitar, and he was ready to make a career out of that. So he was traveling everywhere, playing in every juke joint in every county that he could get in. And because of this, Virginia, his young wife, ended up becoming lonely. And very soon after that, she ended up becoming sickly. And her side of the family hates Robert Johnson. They didn't understand this whole music business. They felt like Robert should be home with his pregnant wife. And then something happened that made them despise Robert Johnson. Virginia ended up going into labor, and she and her child died during childbirth. And her family was devastated. And Robert Johnson was also very devastated. But allegedly, her family would not let him grieve in peace. They would be walking by the house, throwing rocks, calling him a sorry dog. And so Robert ended up escaping the whole situation by just leaving Arkansas for good. And he basically became a traveling musician after that. And although Robert was on the road because he believed in himself and his music, baby, the road at this time did not believe in him. The musician Son House said that one night he was playing at a club. Robert Johnson got on the stage just banging that guitar any kind of way. Baby said the owner marched out to Son House and was like, "You better get that dude off the stage before I throw both of y'all out." And so everybody is waving Robert Johnson off, you know what I'm saying? People are booing him everywhere he goes. And one day when he was so-called touring in Robinsonville, Mississippi, he just kind of disappeared. Son House and the musician Johnny Shines just said, Robert was nowhere to be found. They woke up one morning and the boy was gone. Nobody had any word on where he had gone. After the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, folks just, didn't know what happened to Robert Johnson. And then 2 years later, everybody looked up and there was Robert Johnson just walking down the road out of the blue. He goes into the local juke joint where Son House is sitting and he plays his guitar in a way that leaves everybody speechless. I mean, they cannot believe it. This is the most magnificent guitar playing that they have ever heard. And so according to the story, allegedly Son House asks immediately, how you doing there? And Robert just leans back and he smiles in a quiet way and he says, "I just learned. That's all. I just learned." And from then on, that is all she wrote. Everybody and their mama wants Robert Johnson to come to their juke joint or their small club or their little shanty party. Whatever that would happen, they wanted Robert there playing. And every time he plays, People seem to almost be in a trance. You know what I'm saying? They're dancing and they are mesmerized. And so soon some eyes start looking to the side. Some folks start to get a little weary. You know, some things seem a little too perfect. His playing is a little too perfect. And suddenly word starts to roll around town that Robert Johnson ain't taught himself to play that guitar like that. Robert Johnson was taught to play that guitar like that by the devil himself. People started saying they knew the whole story. Some folks even say that they seen him. Said that they saw Robert Johnson walk to a crossroad. And at that crossroad, he was with a man wearing all black, but he had hooves for feet. The people who told these stories about seeing Robert Johnson at the crossroad even added the details that they saw Robert sign his name on the dotted line with his own blood. After that, the devil said, "Hand me your guitar, boy." Robert gave it to him. The devil tuned the guitar, handed it back to Robert, and Robert had been playing flawlessly ever since then. So that was the story. Some people believed it, some people didn't. But I know folks started watching Robert Johnson very closely to see if his behavior mirrored that of a man who had sold his soul. And baby, when it came to the folks watching Robert Johnson looking for this, Robert Johnson did not let them down, especially when it became to his behavior concerning the ladies. Stories claim Robert Johnson kept him a woman, said that he'd be talking to about 3 or 4 of them that would be at the club at the same time. He was so ruthless, he would walk right up to a gal and ask her, "Hey gal, you want to go out back with me?" And almost all of the girls always would say yes, but every once in a while you would have a lady to say, "I'm married." Said Robert would say, "Look like he ain't here. So you want to go to the back with me anyway?" And some of those married women would say no, and some of those married women would go on to the back and forget about their husbands for a little while. But that's not even where the scandal comes in at. The scandal comes in on the times when Robert would come and approach the woman and she would say she was married and her husband would be sitting right there or somewhere close around her. And when the woman would say, "Well, I'm married, you know, this is my husband right here," Robert would say, "Oh, it is. Okay, that's your husband, huh? Well, you want to go to the back with me so I can show you what a real man do?" It said as soon as he would say that, them husbands would lay his behind out. And the husbands a lot of times had his homeboys there with him. So before you know it, Robert Johnson is on the floor getting beat and kicked until he is a bloody pulp. As a matter of fact, Johnny Shawn said that this is why he hated playing in the same juke joint with Robert Johnson, because Robert liked to holler at women in front of their husbands, and then their husbands would start beating him up. And per Johnny Shawn's, Robert couldn't punch his way out of a paper bag. And so Johnny Shawn's, as well as other musicians, would feel obligated to have to jump in to help Robert Johnson, and then they might get beat up. And so it was just a big mess. Robert Johnson was just a hot rod. And as I'm telling these stories about Robert Johnson and these women, you guys are probably imagining him with a gaggle of beauties on his arms, you know, a beautiful flock of women. But according to the story, a so-called beautiful or fine woman couldn't do nothing for Robert Johnson. They said when a fine woman would walk up to him, Robert Johnson would be like, "Yeah, trick, yeah," like Soulja Boy or somebody. Robert Johnson liked them ugly. And if they were older and ugly, that was even better. And this may seem noble to some people, but the truth was that this wasn't noble at all. Because Robert had this thing of telling his homeboys that the uglier the woman, the better she'll take care of you. And so allegedly in every town he went to, he had this whole flock of ugly women giving him money, buying him new suits, new shoes, paying his fare. Matter of fact, one of these women was alleged to be named Coletta Craft, but everybody called her Callie. Gossip claims that Callie was a very heavy-set, homely-looking woman who was about 10 years older than Robert. And Robert around this time was maybe about 23, so maybe Callie was around 33. But anyway, Callie would basically crawl on her hands and her knees for Robert. She was so happy when he chose her, or basically started living in her house for a little while, y'all, that she used to bring this man breakfast, lunch, and dinner in bed every day just so he wouldn't have to move. He wouldn't have to get up. Not only that, of course, she gave him money to put in his pocket, kept him in the flyest clothes around. Callie did so much for Robert Johnson that he wanted to keep her delusional over him, and so he asked her to marry him, which they did in 1931. But Callie couldn't tell anybody about the marriage. Matter of fact, allegedly, they snuck a preacher to her house, so they would be the only two that knew about the marriage. She couldn't invite her family, her friends, nothing. I don't even think that Callie was allowed to wear a wedding band. And even if she was, a wedding band wasn't coming nowhere near Robert Johnson's finger because he wanted to keep his options open. And one of those options really throws the he like 'em old and he like 'em ugly thing out of the window, because that same year that Robert allegedly married Callie in 1931, he went to play a show in Lafleur County, Mississippi. And while he was there, sometime before or after the show, he ended up seeing a 15-year-old girl by the name of Virgie Jane. Robert told Virgie Jane that he wanted to see her in the woods the next day. And so Virgie Jane grabbed her friend Eula May and she went into those woods the next day. And when she came out of those woods the next day, she was pregnant with Robert Johnson's baby, a son by the name of Claude Johnson. And of course, this is all a scandalous thing, child, but we'll get back to the story of Claude in just a minute. I just wanted to bring that story up right now to give as an example of one of the many reasons that Robert Johnson was not keen to wear his wedding band. And it is very crazy that Callie actually allowed this behavior from Robert. Then, in the year 1934, Callie ended up getting sick, and she couldn't bring in the money to take care of her precious Robert like she used to. And so one night she went to sleep complaining of a headache due to her illness, and the next day she opened her eyes, Robert Johnson was gone. Allegedly, Callie Craft was so heartbroken by this treatment that she died shortly after that. And maybe Robert cared that Callie died, and maybe he didn't. But regardless of how he felt, one thing is for certain: allegedly he was already living with another woman by the time Callie passed away. And Robert Johnson just kept on rolling along. But now, this whole time he was rolling, his fame was getting bigger and bigger. Another thing that was getting bigger and bigger was his drinking problem. Robert Johnson loved the whiskey. And with the fame getting bigger and the whiskey getting bigger, allegedly Robert Johnson became even more disrespectful with some of his behavior. Gossip claims he was in Clarkwood, Mississippi, when a young Robert Lockwood Jr. came rushing up to him asking if Robert could teach him how to play. Robert Johnson was like, "Sure, boy, I'll educate you." Child, of folks say that Robert Lockwood Jr. came home one day and found Robert Johnson educating his mama. But maybe Robert Lockwood wasn't upset because allegedly after this hookup, Robert Johnson and Robert Lockwood Jr.'s mother, a lady by the name of Estella Coleman, started to go steady for a little while. But it couldn't have been too steady because Robert also was messing with a lady who lived about 4 houses down the road by the name of Willie Mae Cross. And thankfully, either both of the women understood their place or they just wanted to keep the peace, because I didn't see anything where they ever fought. But then again, maybe the reason they never fought each other is that they were both content for messing around with a newfound star. Because by the year 1937, baby, Robert Johnson was on his way to being huge, like big time huge. He had recorded his first record. He had started to take press and promo photos. He was turning into a real professional musician. And with his fame getting bigger and bigger by the second, now those legends and those myths surrounding his guitar playing were spreading into Black communities that were located all over. And when he ended up finding out that that 15-year-old that he had slept with back in 1931, Virgie Jane, when he found out that she had actually given birth to a child that was supposed to be his, Robert went back down to Lafleur County to try to start a relationship with the boy. Baby said Virgie Jane's family wouldn't even let Robert Johnson into the house. Told Robert that they'd heard that he'd had some dealings with the devil, and he wasn't going to bring that sin up in their house. And the way Claude Johnson told the story, after his family had told Robert Johnson that, he kind of just sat at the screen door peeking out at his dad, and then Robert told him, "Well, boy, I tried to know you, But I guess they just ain't gonna let me know you. Then he walked off back into his road traveling, bar hopping, guitar playing life, which unfortunately was a life that wasn't going to be lived much longer. Now, of course, there are different stories and theories and everything else regarding this last part of Robert Johnson's life. I'm going to tell you guys two of the versions that made the most sense to me. The first version says, on August the 16th, 1938, Robert Johnson traveled to Greenwood, Mississippi to play at a local club. He played that good old music. The women went into their trance-like behavior, rocking those hips, waving those hands, smiling. Robert looked out amongst this sea of women and found one that he liked. When he gets off stage, he goes over to the woman and he starts to mad. The woman either does tell him that she is the club owner's wife or she doesn't tell Robert. Regardless of if Robert knows it or not, the club owner knows that's his wife. And the club owner must have heard stories about Robert Johnson's reputation messing around with married women or something. Because rumor has it, or according to this story, he didn't even confront Robert Johnson. He went straight to where Robert Johnson's drink was sitting and allegedly he poisoned it. Gossip claims not too long after that, Robert walked back over to his drink and he took a swig. And about 5 minutes after that, he started to feel unwell. He was taken from the club and to a nearby house so he could lay down, but the whole time he was laying down, he was holding his stomach and he was screaming out in pain. And then suddenly he just stopped all of the noise, stiffened up, and just like that, Robert Johnson was dead. The other version of the story says that Robert Johnson came to Greenwood, Mississippi to play at a plantation party. The sharecroppers that lived on the land, they were throwing a party. Robert is there dancing, drinking, flirting, playing, but soon the moonshine that they had at the party ran out. Allegedly, they came in with a fresh new batch, and Robert was one of the first ones hollering for somebody to fill his cup. He takes a huge swig and then a few sips after that. He's still laughing and talking and flirting, but suddenly his vision gets cloudy. He starts sweating profusely, even more than he already is. I mean, sweat is just dripping everywhere. And he starts to scream out, "Oh Lord, no." So they take him to one of the sharecroppers' houses, and once inside, Robert gets even worse. He's not even saying words anymore. Allegedly, he is on the floor, crawling on all fours, barking like a dog. He's holding his stomach, he's holding his head, he's rolling around. Every time he tries to speak, only grunting and huffing comes out. They say his screaming out from the pain even sounds like the howling of a dog now. Allegedly, Robert carries on with this type of behavior for about 20 minutes and nobody can calm him down. Then his body starts to convulse. He starts seizing. He lets out one of the deepest and most menacing growls that anybody has ever heard. Then he lays flat on his back with his body stiffened up and he died. Just like that, dead at 27 years old. Now the folks say that some of the more logical folks felt like it was ethanol poisoning from the alcohol. But I'm not sure if that makes much sense because from what I know, there wasn't a record of anybody else dying that night. But maybe everybody's body reacts differently to alcohol. All I know is that the folks that allegedly witnessed Robert's death said it wasn't no ethanol poisoning. They said the devil taught him how to play his guitar and the devil came back for his due. They said all that barking and crawling and howling Robert was doing meant them hellhounds was hot on his trail and they finally caught up with him. And so, this is how Robert Johnson became one of the first in a long line of celebrities who suddenly gained fame only to die at the very young age of 27. And so if you want that fame bad enough, go on out there to that dusty crossroad, get your shoes filled with mud. The devil gonna be waiting there with a pen in his hand, ready to sign your name in blood. And so this is the end of the old Hollywood scandalous tale of legendary, almost mythological musician Robert Johnson. If you guys enjoyed the video, please hit like. If you guys are new to the channel, please subscribe. And before I go, I have to say that one of you guys sent me a beautiful, wonderful gift from Amazon, but it did not have a note with your name name or your information on it. So if you do want me to know your identity and you do want your shout out, please email me your information and any note that you would like to leave for me at ashleysaysso20@gmail.com. Alrighty guys, I will be back with another video soon. Bye.